Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Jennifer. I'm with Search Inc., and I am the Community Inclusion Coordinator, which is a little different than RAC. It just means I make sure that people participate in their community. Yeah, I'm just really glad to be here.
So before we start, I want to talk a little bit, before we start talking about assessing rights, I want to talk a little bit about some rights so that we can get a little bit of a basis for what we are doing today. So we're going to do a poll right now. And what I'm going to want to know, the poll should be popping up any second, is what rights do people with disabilities have? It's multiple choice. So if you can fill this out real quick, then that'll give us a basis for talking about it. Wow, I see there's 293 people on here, so that's exciting. And that's 293 computers. Maybe we have like tons of people watching on one screen. So this is exciting because I get to watch the numbers. I don't know if you guys can see this. I get to watch the numbers, and as we are finishing up this poll, I'm going to shut it down in about 2 seconds. I like to do polls because if you're like me, you're doing 15 things while you're listening to this webinar. So at least this forces you to look back at the screen for a minute. But the people with disabilities have the same rights as everybody else has. And let me, share results. There we go. Okay. I'm going to close this down. Whoa. I'm going to close the poll. So of the civil rights that we have listed, I'm not going to close the poll. Of the civil rights that we talk about, access to courts, free association, let's think for a minute about those civil rights. Let's talk just for a second about free association. The right to free association. Do people living in full life service really have a right to free association? Do they get to see the people who they want to see when they want to see them? Do they get to see their friends outside of the workshop? Do they get to see their friends who are served by another agency when they want to see them? Another thing, another right, picking one, the right to marry, procreate, and raise children. Across the US, in many, many states, if someone with an intellectual or developmental disability gives birth to a child, that child is taken away before the parent ever has a chance to learn how to raise the child. And we just finished an election, and we'll be talking a little bit about voting later. But the right to vote in Illinois, where Jennifer and I are, people who have guardians, the guardians do not have a say on whether or not the person can vote. And when I worked for an organization, we did voter registrations, and we called every single guardian to ask if it was okay for their child or their ward to vote. And it wasn't until after I left that I found out that in Illinois, at least, people have a right to vote whether they're under guardianship or not. There are states where that is not the case. And I'm just guessing that if you don't already know in your state, you're going to go find out after this. But when we're talking about rights, let's talk a little bit, if I can change my screen, about some human rights and people in services, because this is really what we want to talk about when we're talking about assessing rights. We're not talking about higher level rights, although those are important, but do people have a right to choose what food? I don't know if you guys can see my pointer. Do people have a right to choose what they're going to eat and when they're going to eat? Do people have a right to choose what time they're going to go to bed or what time they're going to get up in the morning? Can people choose what they're going to wear, where they buy their clothes? I've been to organizations where they don't want the people receiving services to shop in thrift shops. And so with the $50 a year they get for clothes, they can buy 2 new things. And so do people get to pick what they're going to watch on TV, where they're going to work, whether or not they can take the driving test? Driving is not a right. You have to pass a test and get a license, but everyone has the right to try to pass the test. Okay, so those are the kinds of rights that we're going to be talking about today as we're talking about assessments. So we're going to do another poll real quick here. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer, who is going to talk about what they do at Search to make sure that the people who are in services there understand their rights. So we have another poll coming up about what's your typical practice for talking with the people who are supported about their rights? Can you, if everybody can fill out that poll? Okay, we're slowing down here. I'm going to end the polling and share this with you. Oops. Do you want to continue? No. Okay. Can you guys, I'm guessing you can see what's on my screen. And a lot of times, routinely, we have informed conversations about rights. We're pretty close there. 39% are at that, 35% about annually the person signs a rights statement, which, what I like to say is, hey, we've got it in 9-point font. We need to fit it on one piece of paper. But that's not what CQL is talking about when we're talking about basic assurances and assessing people's rights. So I'm going to switch the slides, and you'll hear Jennifer saying to me, hey, switch that slide, Liam. But we talked about, before we can ask somebody about their rights and what rights are important to them, which the original title of this was, how do we find out what rights are important to the people who we serve? Okay, but that was way too long. But that's really what we want to talk about today. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer, and she's going to tell you what Search does all about this. So go ahead, Jen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leanna. Thank you, Kathy, for having me participate. I'm really excited about this. I always say that you don't know that you don't know that you don't know until you know that you don't know it. Because like it says here, before we ask, we teach. Before I go on, I want to say that there are 2 concepts that I'm going to bring up quite often, and I'm going to kind of bring them up over and over because it's kind of the paradigm in which we present new ideas to our folks here at Search. And one concept, and I'll explain it all, it'll become clear. One is micro to macro, like the big picture, and then kind of drilling down to macro. And this will make sense in a bit, hopefully. And the other one is kind of the merry-go-round, and that you can kind of see the screen here. This is kind of what I mean about the merry-go-round. When I started here 18 years ago, we had a whole different conversation about rights, and folks were like in their pajamas at 4:30, eating at the same time every day, and that was great. That was the status quo, and we've just come so far with like creating a real life for folks. So, but how do you do a paradigm shift? It's systemic. It's the whole agency. And I always say it's like a merry-go-round. You've got a merry-go-round on the playground, so there's no right way to get on. You just jump on, and eventually you'll get all the way around the merry-go-round. So what we do is first of all, we educate. We let them know what they don't know. We educate, we do trainings, we inform. Once we do that, that inspires feedback. And I'm going to go over the ways that we do all of these things. This is just the merry-go-round. So we educate, and then we solicit feedback. We ask for questions. We ask for comments. We ask for feedback, suggestions. And then with those questions, we provide more answers, or we find an answer, or we even sometimes change policy to reflect the wishes or the questions provided. And then once we have the new answers, then we go back and we re-educate, right? So that's kind of the structure of what I'm going to go through here. So next slide. All right, so at Search, there's a few ways. There's 3 ways that we disseminate or educate or share information, empower our self-advocates. I'm going to go through these and then we'll do the slides. The first one is the Rights Handbook. This is just a basic document that we give to everybody who receives services here at Search, be it day training or residential. It's just a list of, and usually that's pretty macro. That's pretty like Bill of Rights. That's pretty, when you live here at Search, you're going to still be able to vote. You are going to be free from harm. You're going to be able to deal with your money. Those are the big macro things. Everybody gets those. They're also the monthly trainings. This is kind of the lion's share. This is like this is our biggest piece of this.
Jen, can you talk for a minute about how you did the video of the Rights Handbook?
Yeah, I was going to do that whenever I showed that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to shut up.
Good. No, I want you there. Stay there. All right, so we've got these, I call them self-advocacy forums. They are forums, they are discussions that happen at every day trading site and every residential site that we have monthly, and I'll go over those a little bit more. These are just the broad strokes. And then we also have focus groups. This is also macro to micro. A focus group is when we have a big issue, something that affects a lot of our folks, and we come in and we ask specific questions, because one of the principles here is that we ask direct questions, not broad questions. So we'll go in and we'll have a focus group about one issue, like say Medicare or their health benefits, and we ask questions that way. So Rights Handbook, monthly trainings, and focus group. So I guess we're going to take a look at each one of these a little bit more closely. Next slide. All right, the Rights Handbook. This is like I said, this is macro. These are the big things. You do not lose your rights due to having a disability. You're entitled to adequate and humane care. These are your big macro Bill of Rights things. And I was saying that, what you're seeing is a printed document, but what's important is that this can reach everybody's inner life. Just handing this out to people who probably might not be able to read, that's not enough. One year we actually did a video starring our individuals, and we broke this down and kind of presented via video each of these principles, which is really cool because then they were in it and they got to it was like a living document. So that was one way. Of course, there's reading on tape and everything, but the Rights Handbook that's just baseline. That's just a start. That's a framework, a macro body of work to work from. So next slide. Okay, the trainings. Okay, so like I said, we call it the Self-Advocacy Forum. It happens monthly. It happens at every site. The Self-Advocacy Forum is 2 parts. It is a training, a vehicle for training, which can mean rights, but it can also mean other things. But this is the context of this discussion. So we use that to educate and empower people with information about rights. But this is also, in the merry-go-round, this is also part of the feedback. This is we give out information and then we ask questions. We'll do a training on Medicare. Now, what questions do you have to ask about that? That's all part of the monthly self-advocacy trainings. Now, I say this one is macro. This one is about voting. That is something that any self-respecting social service agency should cover, right? We all should be able to participate in the election. So this is kind of a macro training. Here at Search, we chose to ask every individual in our residential program, every single person, if they wished to participate in the election. We feel that we don't pick the Americans that we choose, like who gets that right. We respected that a non-answer is free speech. We asked every single person, we asked them if they wish to participate. There was a yes, there's a no, there was a no response. And then we also asked them in what way, in what manner would they like to cast their ballot? How is that, Leanne? In what manner would they like to cast their ballot? Now, we did not stop there. I know that there's a whole other world, of responsibility around a vote. And that's a whole different webinar. We did education. We were very, very thorough on the other side of this page. But the thing we're trying to answer here is, how do we find out what rights are important to the individuals? How we do it is a whole different conversation. So this is how we asked every American in our care if they wished to vote. And we recorded it, and we acknowledged it, and we dignified it. Okay, but that's very macro, right? So next slide. Let me take a micro.
She's going to take a drink from her Search cup. And you guys can't see my CQL shirt that I have on.
If it rains, I got an umbrella. Okay. All right. Okay. So this, I believe, is the responsibility rests on the agency to dig deep here. When CQL came and, began to work with us, it was really, it was a great tool to open up our toolbox of kind of these micro trainings, what I consider micro. With every macro, like the election is macro, but you can find these other things below that. You can dig deep in those and find the rights, like how to get there. There's a difference between a right and a freedom. You might have the right, but does the agency offer the freedom to practice the right? So they might want to vote, but do they have the right and the freedom to get to an accessible location? That's there's always micro rights under the macro rights. So here's in April, this was a self-advocacy forum training. This is taken straight from CQL literature. And what happens is you begin to share, hey, have you ever thought about, going to a gym? That's on here. You ever thought about, hey, you know what? I actually would like to go to a gym. How do I get there? So you send that information out, and then when you look for feedback, those questions start coming out. And that's when you begin to find out what's important to the people you serve. Okay, next slide. Okay, the third thing is tackling, how I just said that there's the macro and then the micro? One of the ways to drill down from macro to micro is talking about it, is really digging in and talking about the issue. For example, in June of 2017, we pulled together a focus group of about, 20 or 30 individuals from across the agency. And we just began talking about their medical services, like Medicare, Medicaid. And we asked very pointed, specific, non-open-ended questions about their medical life. Have you ever seen your medical file? Is there anything in the file that perhaps you would like to not be available to, stranger eyes? I don't think we said it like that. What changes would you like to see? What do you like or not like about the doctor? Very specific questions, which created a conversation. And Leanne and I were talking about this. This whole thing is about just ways to create conversations and then ways to keep the conversations alive. So we had a big focus group, across the whole agency. Again, the self-advocacy forum also asked specifically about medical services. So then next slide. Okay. In the merry-go-round, the third one was where like you present information, they ask questions, you get feedback, you know, concerns, suggestions. The third part of the merry-go-round is to answer the questions and then read and then answer. Like it's a call and response. You know, this creates a dialogue in the agency. So we had the focus group, and they asked specific questions, and we compiled the answers to those questions in a PowerPoint that's called Medicare, Medicaid, Meta what? And then we bring it back to people. Now, here's what's important about this piece. This is why it's got its whole little oval on the merry-go-round. It's because I can't explain who pays for your medical visits if you don't know what Medicare is. I can't explain I can't explain insurance until you know how insurance works. I can't explain about switching doctors until you understand the concept of a network. So there are questions. So the piece of this is like more education. Go ahead, the next slide. Okay, so this was a part of the Medicare, Medicaid, Meta what presentation, because we had to kind of teach Medicare everywhere, Medicaid, it's the state. Because later on, because the questions, when you do this, the questions get so bright and cutting edge and smart, and the agency has a lot of work to do on the other side of these questions. Again, every right has a responsibility. We can't answer how to make this happen, but we can find out what needs to happen, and that's what we're talking about here. So we had to learn about Medicare, Medicaid, SSI. So guess what? When they started asking about dental work, they understood the concept of Medicare, Medicaid, and then, you know, the Medicaid portion of it, you do, you don't. You begin to create like you give them a vocabulary and a dialogue and a playground in which to like understand the rules of the game. So this was the education part. And then next slide. So this is from the focus group. So how can and do we have our medical bills paid? Okay, here's the beautiful thing about this. When we present back to our self-advocates the answers to the questions, they can see that we are responding to them. It's acknowledgement. It's like it's validity. It validates their question, and it also begins to answer bigger pictures. We also did another one of these on SSI and their financial benefits. You know, up until that point, the money just appeared, and you know, activities just appeared, and groceries just appeared. But then when they said that they wanted to like take control of that money, we had to like teach them about the whole system, and then everybody just understands more. I'm getting off track there, but what I'm saying is
but that goes back to rights. That
right. Well, that's what I'm trying to do.
If they don't know, if there are people in services who have no idea that this money is floating around every month. They turned 18 and mom was the rep payee. They moved into service. The agency's the rep payee. They have no idea about this money, and so how can they exercise any sort of rights? And before anybody starts breathing, we'll talk a little bit about responsibilities too. But Absolutely. That's not what this webinar is about.
Well, no, but let me just say something. Let me address that very quickly, because when someone, there is an inherent responsibility to rights, and talking about it is one thing, but here's the thing: in our rights, you know, handbook, it says you can be in charge of your money. And then when you begin to be in charge of your money and the reality sets in, like the responsibility is inherent in the right. And so it's a huge paradigm shift. We're going from the money would disappear into the house and things would be bought, it's a paradigm shift. This is not a simple thing. This is a systemic turn of a barge in a very narrow river. Yeah.
So go ahead and finish up on before we ask.
So, okay, and the last thing I want to say about these presentations, like one of the beautiful things about the concepts of CQL is that people change and their minds change and their answers change. So we don't leave this be. We come back next year, and now we have a year of living in the knowledge of how Medicare, Medicaid works. The year of living in the knowledge of how the network works and how medications change and everything. Now you've got new questions, so we revisit this every year and keep the conversation going. And here's the other thing about that: like that's a big micro, but let's go. That's macro. Let's go micro for a second. Like whenever it's like, you should be able to lock have a key to your house. That doesn't happen overnight. But when we do this and we ask, every year, it stays in the conversation. It has to be done. It doesn't drop. You don't just read that in the notebook. You keep it alive through conversations. You keep it alive through discussions. That's what I want to say.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have a couple of examples of some rights assessments that we're going to show you just pieces of. One is from Search, which is taken right from their self-advocacy questionnaires that they do with people every month on different things. The other one is from Johnson Center Home in North Carolina. That's actually a 9-page assessment that they do with the people who receive services from their organization, and they have graciously told us that we can share that with people. I want to say, if you have a rights assessment that you are using at your organization and you're willing to share that, my contact information and Jennifer's will be on the last slide, and we would love to see that, because when we share information, the lives of the people who we work with get better. So I chose the freedom of religion right that Search asks about, because they asked some pretty unique questions. The first one, is your faith or religion important to you? We talk about that at CQL all the time. We talk about that in basic assurances. We talk about that in the personal outcome measures. But then when we talk about, when Jennifer's talking about those micro, once we dig deeper or start peeling back that onion, do you go to Search? Do you go to church services? Some people do, some people don't, some people want to, some people don't. Are they going where they want to? Are they going to Our Lady of the Direct Care staff? Which, what church do they want to go to? But then they go further. Do you enjoy watching religious services on TV? If you do you have a favorite program that you watch, or a favorite pastor, to try to individualize what people are doing? And finally, included in that, do you have a special tradition? Is there something that you always did when you were a kid? Christmas Eve, I got a new pair of pajamas every Christmas Eve. Still, I get a new pair of pajamas every year, just because I'm weird like that. And it's a tradition from when I was a kid. Did your family celebrate Kwanzaa? What did you do for Hanukkah? All of these things fall under the right for freedom of religion.
And I'd like to say too that the self-advocacy forums that go into the houses, they're meant to be removed from the page and brought to the table. I think one of the most important things here is a discussion. Like this was kind of designed to be a discussion among housemates, a sharing, because like more stuff like gets revealed in the conversations. That's why the focus groups are so good, because like sometimes it's so hard when I sit down, it's a blank page, like what do I address now? But sometimes if you just, begin a conversation and make it a discussion, a give and a take, that's when what's important like really happens. These are great questions, but then somebody might go, you know, deeper, remember something, or you know, or create a new tradition in the house. It just has to come off the page. It has to be a living experience, like, you know, from the page to the people, a living experience that's what draws out what's important. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Johnson Center Home, this page that I just put up now, I picked a couple from there. Again, this is a 9-page document that they cover with the people who are in services. Does the person talk on the phone to friends or family? You know, I could underline this like 6 times, without other people hearing. Can they go in their room? Can they visit with friends and family in private? Does the person want to spend time alone? Some people don't enjoy being by themselves. Does the person receive his or her medications in private? You know, the answer to that may be no, and they may not care. Some people don't care about who knows what medications they take, but maybe they want people to knock before they come into their room. Are they afforded privacy during personal care? And then if you look at the bottom, is this right understood? We go back to before we ask, we teach, because if people don't know that they have the right, then they don't, how can they understand that we're, you know, violating is a strong word, but, you know, that their right is being violated if they don't know that they have the right. Is this right of interest to the individual? Again, however many people are on here right now, let's say 400 people, each of us has a different idea of what is important to them regarding their rights. And finally, they say, list any supports that are needed to exercise this right. And the other one that I pulled out of the 9 pages is people choose what they wear. Okay, this, Jennifer's going to talk a little bit about the drill down on this and talking with people. We didn't want to get off track on how do we implement this with people who don't communicate traditionally. Jennifer's going to talk about that in a second. But when we're talking about choice of clothing, do they get to pick what they're going to wear? Do they get help if they want it? Do they choose what clothes they're going to buy, or do they just show up? These are the types of things, you know, when we're talking, you know, the drill down is, do people get to exercise their personal style? If someone is wearing something that is not attractive on them, how do we deal with that? Okay, these are all things that stem from these basic assessments, like the rights assessment. That is a starting point. Okay, everything we're talking about, if you've been through the personal outcome measure training, we list rights. That is not in any way, shape, or form meant to be the end. That is the beginning of the conversation. Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about how you use your tools with people
Yes.
who don't
Yes.
communicate
Yes.
with words?
And I just want to say one thing, because if I was listening, if I was, you know, watching the webinar, I would, in my head, I would just be screaming, well, what about the responsibilities? And we talk about this. But this is, I mean, like the responsibility, making it happen, that's the agency. Like that's teamwork, that's policy, that's, you know, that's riffing, that's improvising, but we have to find out which battles to fight, and that's what this is, you know. Anyways,
and we do I'll do a little plug, but you know, CQL, we have the rights cards that include the rights, the responsibilities, how the staff can support. And so we don't want you thinking we're not thinking about responsibilities. That's just we could do an hour just on that. on how we do that, and we really wanted to focus on finding out what rights are important. So Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm very that I feel very strongly about, and which I wish that this could also be like a 10-hour webinar, is like, this is great when someone could say, yes, I want to do that, no, I don't want to do that, and what about? But the real question is, how do we reach the inner lives of those who are not communicating with us, outright? So how do I extend or make sure that the rights of a person who does not communicate like verbally, like, is allowed and has this right? I'm gonna go macro again with that thing, asking every single person. We acknowledge that the person didn't answer. Like, we acknowledge that, and that's acknowledging the right. We wrote it down and we asked. But now on some of these things, like the choice of clothing, I choose what clothes I want to wear. I think that every educational rights tool can be rewritten or reorganized or molded to reach that person through the advocates, through the caregivers, through the people who know them best, through staff, through family. And I'm just going to use this choice of clothing as an example. So you might not be able to ask somebody, do you choose what clothes you want to wear? But you can ask the advocate, this person who knows this person best, what clothes do they reach for first? What article of, what pair of pants is this person going to reach for on a Saturday afternoon? Is there a material that this person really doesn't like against their skin? Cotton, polyester. Does this person like turtlenecs? What's this person's favorite color? I could,
and those are all things that we can observe.
Correct.
So are they pulling at their collar? Are they itchy pulling at their clothes? So,
right.
These are things that the people who know them best.
Some people like long socks. Some people like the short socks.
Exactly.
Like, these are all the things that you take every one of these questions, and it's really tough, but I can repurpose them from, for the advocate, for the caregiver. Different people like different pajamas. Like, does this person like footies? Does this person what does this person prefer to sleep in? Even if the person can acknowledge, like, I could put a picture of like kind of a posh woman going to church. I can put like somebody in her yoga pants, and somebody can make that choice, perhaps. So there are, with everything, and it takes sometimes it takes more work than others, but you can ask the advocate to create that right in that person's life to the best extent. And by the way, there's no right answers here. Like, we're just making this up as we go along, but the intent is to extend these rights to the people that we serve. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even to this, on this one, if we go to list any supports needed to exercise this right, that may say to talk to staff about what the person is most comfortable with. What is what actions does this person do that makes us think that they like this, that they don't like this? So we wanted to leave. Go ahead, and then we're going to take some questions.
Yeah. Okay, like the thing. Okay, like that's kind of an obvious one, but let's take the money. Let's take the people should be in charge of their money, and if certainly there might be some people who are not going to go to the bank and cash their check, but what I think I did in that month was I asked the advocates and the caregivers, hey, is there something that you could see that would, like, in addition to the house, or like, is there a product or something that you think might be beneficial to this person's life? Like, they've been working, they're like, hey, you know what would be great? This great hammock thing, but there's no place to say that. So what do you think they should be spending their money on? Not sure it's going to happen. Maybe they don't have the money, but maybe they do have the money. So you as an advocate can say, I think this person, if they I think they would not mind walking into the store and buying like this great chair. Then there's an avenue for it. It's a way to say, you know, have them be in charge of their money through the voice of the advocate. Yeah.
Right. And that one woman who I worked with, every time she got her paycheck, they went out and got fries or, you know, some favorite thing to equate. And this was a person who needed total life support. They wanted to equate, look, you receive this piece of paper, you get something for that. So we can take some questions now. I'm putting up our contact information. Oh, hello. It's actually search-inc.org. Leanne, let me fix that while we're talking. But does anybody have any questions?
So, Leanne, this is Kathy, and there are a few questions. The first one is really kind of an observation, but could you talk a little bit more about how guardianship affects people's rights, particularly around voting? This person said in North Carolina, people who have guardians are able to vote.
They are. See, that's fantastic. And it goes state by state. In Oklahoma, people, convicted felons and people who have guardians are not allowed to vote. And so every state is different about that right. One of the things that we talked about in preparing for this, we were talking about someone who really wanted to vote. Was that person from Search, Jen?
Yes.
The person really wanted to vote and did not have a guardian, but mom did not want the person to vote.
He does not vote.
And so he didn't vote. And we talked about the fact that all over the world, every single day, people do things to keep the peace. And so it's what's important to that person. Yeah, he wanted to vote. It was more important for him to maintain a relationship with his mom.
And CQL says that some people change. So guess what? Next year, gonna ask again. Gonna call mom again and ask again. Same thing with a financial thing. They have the right to do it. This woman was her own guardian, but the family was really strongly opposed to it. I made a case for it. Said I would, you know, I'm gonna be there every step of the way. But there were good reasons. Like if this person, you know, went and kind of on a mad spending spree, they might not have money to do for the essentials, and they didn't want to, you know, have to. Those were good issues.
Yeah.
So we discussed it, and I said, I'll come back next year.
Yep. I'll say regarding guardianship and voting and everything else, if someone does not have a guardian, that means that their civil rights are intact. Okay, it's not that person's their own. I'm not my own guardian. I would never say that about myself, but my civil rights are intact. And so as we're talking about the people, and I also say under guardianship, because that's kind of what it is. And I realize it's really easy for me. I don't have to talk to the guardians and keep the peace. But as far as voting, you can check in your state how guardianship affects that. And if you email me, I know that somewhere I have a document that says it for every single state, and I can send that back to you. Are there other questions, Kat?
Yes, there are. So staying along the same lines as guardianship, could you talk a little bit about what to do when you have a parent or a guardian that really is controlling every aspect of a person's life? And when is it considered to be obtrusive?
Now, the time that we are in right now is the perfect time to deal with this. With the new home and community-based settings rule, the best thing you can say is, look, the federal government has now said that people with disabilities can fill in the blank. They can have a key to their house. They can't have visitors at any time. They have to have food at any time. Name that freedom and blame it on HCBS, which it doesn't go into effect for another couple of years, but it's out there. If you email me, I can send you some things. I won't hold them up, but it's all about how the home and community-based settings rule. I have one all from CQLI. So CQL has one for staff and for people who receive services. And that now is the perfect time to work with the guardians to lessen control without it being the organization that's having to do it. And so right now I am blaming everything on the new home and community-based settings rule. It's this new rule we have to follow, that, this says it, and you can show them the rule. So hopefully that will help.
Okay, thank you. The next question's pretty easy, Jennifer. What is Search's website? She can't find it.
I believe.
Well,
Look
maybe
on
it's
your
not
shirt or your mug.
So www.search.
Search-inc.org. I just want to say too about the voting thing. We send that out to every single individual, and then I heard from guardians because their child told them what was happening or whatever. The only person who came in and said, no, my child's not voting, kind of swooped in. I didn't reach out to them. They found out and kind of came in and said no. But also sometimes it's, you've been working with a family for so long. It's a team thing. It's a respect. It's I don't want to make waves when I can do this again next year. And by the way, even if they didn't participate, they didn't vote, they were still welcome to all of the trainings. Even if a guardian, comes in and wants to be more involved or no ma'am or whatever, they're still invited to my trainings. They can still participate.
So this is Kathy, and one of the things that I'll say about is that, you have a responsibility to the person to support them in the best way. And sometimes it is about teaching the person to negotiate with that guardian. And some of that is modeling that. So I think, it's really important that you have a good working relationship. So there's a few more questions. And so one person would like you to talk a little bit more about the All About Me folder. Can you explain what that is?
Go ahead, Jen. I love all
Yeah,
about
that's a webinar, and I'll try to make this quick. This came straight out of my experience with CQL. We've got each individual in all of our houses has their own personal All About Me binder. I like to kind of think of it more as a journal. And it's because we do these assessments and we sit down in one day and we're like, tell me all your dreams, tell me your hopes. What do you want to do? Now, goodbye. And I feel like this is a life. So we stretch it out across the year and take time with each thing. So every month there's that training, and this is a little bit different. And there's also a separate thing, an All About Me for each individual at every single house that explores kind of who they are, and each a different topic each time. Hey, here's how I like to be woken up in the mornings. It's something that it's kind of like a yearbook and a tool for, the personal meetings, and like a dream journal. And also, if I was a new staff to a house and I wanted to learn about this person who couldn't really communicate with me, I could also go and see the wisdom of the caregivers before me, so I wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. So again, it's a monthly personal journal, self-assessment, training. For example, in there was around the election time, it was here are all of your elected officials and here's your polling place. There was that. But then there was another one, it was this was my first memory that kind of thing. So it's all about me. It turns over every year, and it's something that we're just kind of creating now. I'd like to see it, kind of grow and be more personal, but that's what it is. It's a yearbook. It's a yearbook that's informative and exploratory, and a bit of a journal. Does that work?
And that I'll say takes about 5 minutes to read, and wouldn't that be fantastic information instead of Mary weighs 300 pounds and she can't have macaroni and cheese.
Right. And like the like the religion thing was in there, and it's been in there a couple of years. It's like, so you go in there and you're like, oh, your family always had ham on, Christmas Eve, or opened a present the night before Christmas, or didn't participate at all. So, and also it also kind of sparks memories in the person too, a bit of a reflection, like my first love was, this kind of.
And how do you like being woken up, and whether you're
your nighttime thing,
or nighttime, what your favorite shows are.
Yes. Yeah. I don't like, if you don't like horror movies, where can you say that? Like, hey, do I like comedies? Do I like dramas? My favorite shows I watched when I was a kid. And again, these are meant to be like discussions in the houses. So it's kind of a community. Oh, that's you, me too.
Yep. And when I was at Search and I saw that, that's when we're like, hey, Search needs to be a part of this. Yeah,
that's the same.
So let's get back to the rights.
Yeah.
And so, because we have a few more questions.
Okay.
And so the next one is, so can you talk a little bit about the process when there's a limitation of a right because of health or safety concerns?
Do you mean like the do they mean the due well, okay. Well, first of all, as far as rights limitations, obviously they have to go through the Human Rights Committee, but the way to make that, and I'll let Jennifer speak to this, but overall, the way to do that is to have the person involved and agreeing to whatever the modification is. And again, we go back to the settings rule. In the settings rule, it says if there is any sort of rights limitation, it has to be revisited every 6 months. And before a rights limitation can be put in place, the organization has to document every single thing that they did to avoid putting a rights limitation into place. And again, this goes back to the new federal rule that most organizations are implementing now because it's coming. Does Search do anything different, Jen?
Well, I mean, that's a very broad question. Like, I would kind of want a specific, because it's different every time, but sometimes it's policy changes. Sometimes the agency's got to figure out how to do it, like locks on doors, like keys for doors. We start small and we figure out how to do it. If it's a real departure from what we've done, we're all about like sampling and task, like starting small and figuring out what works, and then with full intention of delivering it to the agency, because it's that rights and responsibilities thing. That is your right, but we need to protect the safety and the care and the health of the people around you.
Right.
And this is so new to agencies everywhere. We do this as a team. We have meetings about it. We committee it. We create action plans, see if they work, document what we did, and then try it, and then expand it to the whole agency. Does that answer the question? That sounds so vague, and vague is so.
Hopefully. Well, we have 3 minutes left. What other questions do we have?
So I want to go back to the, so there is some guidance about due process and human rights committees and the impartial review that we would certainly look at when there are any reasons to restrict anybody's rights. We would expect all of those assessments and things to happen. There are 2 other things, if I can get them in quickly. I think it's important, and I'm going to read what this one participant said in response to really when someone maintains their civil rights, and so they haven't been adjudicated incompetent and they have a guardian. She talks about, if somebody really is interested in having sex, you know, and they maintain that right to enter into a sexual relationship, or marry, and maybe in some states, even if they have a guardian, then, you know, why would if that's not included in the guardianship law, why would you even ask the guardian, if the guardian should be informed that people maintain their rights and that their guardian's not allowed to micromanage their
Right. Well, if the person's civil rights are intact, then the guardian, you don't have to ask the guardian. Again, does the person want the guardian asked? Is the person interested in getting permission, you know, or asking for a hand in marriage? Or if the person is not under guardianship, they have exactly the same, they could walk out the door of the organization at any time and take their money follows the person with them. Okay. And so for people under guardianship, that's where I think the questions are coming in, and how to get around that.
And again, guardianship laws vary from state to state.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the last is really, you said that, Leanne, you said that you would welcome people sending you rights assessments. If someone sends that to you, would you look at it to see if it's as comprehensive as you might think it needs to be?
Oh yeah, I just want to see them. I love learning what other organizations are doing. I'm not saying, hey, send it to me so I can send it all over the place. Really, I just love when organizations are doing anything around rights. And so that was kind of selfish. So I'm not saying I'm going to send it out to everybody. I'll share it with whoever I like my bosses, Kathy, but I wouldn't be sending it to or posting it on the internet. I just think that it's super important, and you know, shoot, maybe we can all working together, taking pieces from everybody, we can create the perfect rights assessment that would be good for like a year till we look at it again next year.
So I think the important thing to remember is that if we look at a rights assessment, we're looking at paper, and what's really important is the implementation of
Absolutely.
that assessment. So, you know, it could be as comprehensive as you need it to be, but if it's not implemented in a way that works for that person, it might not work. To the point that we even find that if someone tried to replicate some of the assessments that we showed you today, they may or may not work in your organization.
Right.
It
right.
has to
Or
really
for
be.
Or for a particular person.
So I think that's the end of the questions.
Perfect.
And we are just at 1:02. Thank you all very much for your participation, and we will look forward to future webinars with you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you.